Hey, folks, and welcome into episode 26 of the Longhorn Mailbag. Thanks for joining us here on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. No specific questions from anyone this week, so kind of just gauged the board to see what you guys were talking about and was able to formulate two questions to discuss with you guys here today. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. First question is something that we've covered a lot on this board, and it's about the interior of the defensive line. Is there a reason to be concerned heading into 2024 for Texas on the interior of the defensive front? I say yes. Steve Sarkisian, in his press conference earlier this past week, said he wasn't too concerned, but you got the feeling that he's probably going to want some more bodies in there, and rightfully so. I mean, right now you could certainly say that they probably need one more quality guy from the transfer portal. The reason that I'm not so confident right now in the interior of the defensive line is just because there's so many unknowns. The first big unknown is what's going to be available in the spring transfer portal window. Just because you may not be certain. What if there's not a guy that is a quality body that would be an instant plug and play for Texas in 2024? If they don't have that, then I think there is right to be concerned because of the second unknown, which is what kind of production Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton will be able to put forth as starters. Now, you can say the same thing that we said about Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat coming into 2023. There was uncertainty about what the production would be like for them. But you keep in mind, Collins has brought not only two different players, but Bo Davis no longer the defensive line coach at Texas. So this is going to be a big test for Kenny Baker early on in his career as the Texas defensive line coach to see if he can get those guys up to par early, especially going into the SEC. But I think the biggest thing that could resolve this issue is Sadir Mitchell. I think if Sadir Mitchell comes along really well, and that's another Kenny Baker project where he's going to have to develop him and get him to a point where he's ready to play. Mitchell's already a guy that the staff was really high on. So if he's a great depth piece for this Texas team and is able to put up really good production behind Broughton and behind Collins, then I think some of the concerns about the interior of the defensive line go out the window and the Longhorns can be successful and have a maybe not equally strong interior defensive line as they had in 2023, but still a good enough group to get the job done and make sure that the defense is somewhat similar to how they were last season. Second thing that we're going to talk about is some of the biggest targets for Texas in the 2025 class. Who are they? At what positions is Texas going to need to fill? Before we start, go ahead and read Hank South's article over on the board about the top 5 biggest positions of need for Texas going into 2025. I didn't go all 5 positions, but still picked some of those and some of the players that would be massive gets for the Longhorns. We're going to start on the defensive line. So kind of to carry on the conversation that we were just having, Brandon Brown is on board for the Longhorns in 2025. That's big, and the Longhorns obviously hoping that he will stick to that commitment. You know, he was committed when Bo Davis was still the defensive line coach, so we'll see if that sticks around. But I think another guy that they could get would be 4-star Cy-Fair defensive lineman Landon Ring. This is a really impressive guy. He was very productive for Cy-Fair on their run towards the state championship this year. They made it pretty far in the playoffs, and he's got ties to Texas. His father, Shane, was a defensive tackle for the Longhorns from 1991 to 1995. So Texas has the edge there recruiting-wise, and it's obviously one of the biggest, if not the biggest, position of need for Texas going into this cycle. So Rink would be a huge addition in that area. Up second is another position of need at linebacker. This past cycle, Texas only took one with Ty Anthony Smith. You remember the class before was when you get Anthony Hill, Leonga Lafau, and just a really solid group of linebackers in that class. Well, Johnny Nanson's going to have to pick up a class of that sort here in 2025. I think it's going to be very important for the Longhorns to reload once again in that linebacker room. And Riley Pettijohn, the 4-star linebacker for McKinney, would be a fantastic starting point. He had 120 tackles for the Lions this past season, and Mike Roach called him the heart of the McKinney defense. So the Longhorns could use an alpha like that in this 2025 linebacker class, and I think it starts with Riley Pettijohn. Last thing here, and the last guy we'll talk about at the last position of need that I'll mention, and that's going to be the tight end position. Now, the Longhorns already have Amari Winston on board, but they usually like to take 2 tight ends per class. The good news is the Longhorns have a plethora of top-end tight end talent to choose from in this class. But of the cream of the crop, I think I'm going to go with Keati Armstrong, who would be the best 1-2 punch with Winston. Just a massive prospect, a huge catch radius, great hands. He can make all the tough catches because of his frame. And I think that the Longhorns would absolutely value that. And if they can make him into a solid blocker and receiving tight end, he would be fantastic for Texas in a room where you lose Tavian Sanders. There's no replacing him. And no one knows what's going to happen with Amari Niblack this upcoming season. So to pair with Amari Winston, I think a big-bodied tight end is going to be a massive matchup nightmare, and Keati Armstrong would be a fantastic second tight end in the class. That's going to do it for this episode of the Longhorn Mailbag. I want to thank you so much for joining us here on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. While you're here, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you're the first to know when new content heads your way. For the rest of the crew, I'm Tommy Yarrish. We'll see you next time.